Hi, my Friday night movie last week was The Fate of the Furious, the eighth film in the Fast and Furious series of car-related action movies. I'd watched most of the previous films in the run-up to seeing the seventh film when that came out, whenever it came out, and I found them to be mostly quite boring and fairly silly. I think as time progressed, they became more entertaining and more leaning into their own ludicrousness. But then the seventh film became suddenly much more po-faced and serious, and I think driven by the death of actor Paul Walker during production, it became more um, uh, aware of its own uh, position and quite infatuated with itself. Um, and this film follows on from that. We start with a sequence that demonstrates just what an amazing guy Dominic Toretto, Vin Diesel's main character, is. Oh, he's the best at racing. He's the best at being lovely to women, but also being respectful. And even after he wins the race, he gives his opponent his car back because he's just such a great guy. And immediately I thought this was a complete joke. The, the film's portrayal of this over the top, paranoid, demonstrative machismo, where someone is so desperate to want to look like such an amazing person, I thought this shows how incredibly insecure Vin Diesel is. Um, he reminded me of Stephen Toast, where he does all his love scenes with his sports vest on. And the film continues in this laughable vein throughout. The story doesn't really make any sense. Clearly, sort of cobbled together from bits and bobs and reshoots, where Toretto is blackmailed by a mysterious supervillain played by Charlize Theron and has to turn against his old friends to conduct a series of heists involving cars for action scenes involving cars to steal some kind of super weapon that will give her control over the world or something or other. And his old team, with all the various other characters who drive around in their cars, have to team up and stop him while driving around in their cars. And it's boring and silly. It's it's incredibly po-faced. It the phrase that came to mind while I was watching it was quintessence of camp, um, as defined by John Waters in that episode of The Simpsons. You could think of camp as being the comically tragic or the tragically comic, something which is portrayed in the opposite way to which one should conceivably do so. So something as ridiculous as this, taken desperately seriously, becomes incredibly camp. Um, Diesel's idea of machismo and masculinity is a complete joke. Um, there are other elements that I think portray that rather better. Dwayne Johnson is his usual charismatic self and fairly entertaining. He has a nice bit of tension with Jason Statham as the returning villain of the previous film is now an uneasy ally, and Statham is charming and gets to do a fun action scene where he has a gunfight on a crashing airliner whilst also looking after a baby. So he's being nice to the baby and then shooting a bunch of people in the face. And that was playing into the silliness. I think that's when it works, when it's leaning into this is this is daft, but don't worry, let's enjoy it, rather than saying, no, this is incredibly serious. The result is a film that is almost incomprehensible, terrible, has a wildly varying tone, quite boring because CGI cars flying around is not exciting. It's a bad film, and I wouldn't recommend it. The Fast and Furious movies are inherently silly. They work when they lean into the silliness. The fifth, and particularly the sixth films, I actually quite enjoyed because they have a sense of their own daftness and play into it and lean into it and say, well, just go with this. We know it's daft. Let's have fun. And that's fine. When it takes itself incredibly seriously, as in the earlier films, when they were less over the top but still a little dull, and here, where they're completely over the top and deranged, they're just a joke. It's not a good film. Don't watch it and stop giving Vin Diesel money.